All right, we're live. Welcome, everybody. We've got another webinar happening here from Gusto, and I hope you are in the right place. If you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube live, make sure you're turning on closed captioning if you need to do that. But yeah, welcome. I'd also love to just kind of hear where folks are joining us from. Do you have snow yet? And if you are not quite off for Thanksgiving, if you're joining us from the US, what is your favorite Thanksgiving treat? I'd love to hear. Is it pumpkin pie? What's your number one dish? What's your number one dish that you really, really love and are looking forward to enjoying this week? I'm not down in the States, but I will give my favorite Thanksgiving dish. I do love roasted Brussels sprouts with a little bit of bacon in there. That's one of my go-tos. How about you, Kevin? What's your number one Thanksgiving dish?
I don't know if I have a number one. I like the whole plate, but turkey's pretty good, and we do some yams with marshmallows on them, so I kind of like that.
Oh, nice. I do love the yams. Yams are so good. All right. Well, let's kind of jump in. I know we got a lot to talk about today. We got a lot to cover. We're talking about leadership. This is sort of the third in our webinar series. We started with mentorship, then we did coaching. Now we're here to talk about leadership. I'm really excited to have Kevin Ames joining us for this webinar. He is the founder and president of the Ames Leadership Institute and has a really, solid career in guiding leaders and coaching and really helping organizations create great leadership cultures. And so I'm going to pass it over to Kevin. Can you give a little bit more of an intro than that? Tell us kind of what brought you to the sort of HR leadership coaching space and, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a long and accidental journey, probably in a lot of ways. In my 20s, we were doing some entrepreneurial stuff. We had 2 or 3 little companies that were moderately successful at the time. And at the time, I read Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I really took that to heart. I really believed that was going to be a nice tool to use as a guide for life. And so I set about developing a purpose statement and some roles and goals and some things associated with that. And that purpose statement ultimately led me to this pursuit of wanting to speak to people and to consult with people and deal with the leadership market a little bit. And so one thing led to another, and I was hired by a company out of Scandinavia to work with them for a few years and became the lead speaker for that company. I was speaking somewhere almost every day for 3-4 years and got busy with that. Went from there to Franklin Covey, Stephen Covey's company, and spent about a decade with them and same space, doing the 7 Habits stuff and leadership stuff. Was going to step out of there to create Ames Leadership at that time and got introduced to a company called O.C. Tanner in Salt Lake, a recognition company. And again, got an offer I couldn't refuse. And so we partnered up there and I thought that'd be 2-3 years. Ended up being almost a decade of great time, great experience there. Went around the world with them and did a lot of stuff. And ultimately I got to the age where I decided, I better get to this Ames Leadership before I die. So we stepped out and did that. I'm getting to those ages, know where I'm, could go either way. So I've been doing that now for about 5 years. And, I just love the space. I think leadership is a fascinating space. It's not always easy to define. Everybody tries to define it, in a million ways, but it's fun to work with people to see if we can create the kind of influence that makes you a leader in fact. And, that's the thing that's most effective is you either have an influence or you don't. And if you have an influence for good, then perhaps you can call yourself a leader. If you don't really have an impact on stuff, you're probably just a title, and everybody's heard all of that stuff. But yeah, a desire to be involved, I think, mostly, and hear myself talk, I guess, is part of that.
That's awesome. No, and I love how you jumped straight into that influence thing. But before we dive down that road, I would love to hear your definition of leadership, because I think, as you said, there's so many definitions out there. There's so many books about leadership and what makes a good leader versus a bad leader and all these other things. But I always like, starting these type of conversations with how do we level set the conversation? Let's talk about what that definition kind of looks like. So how do you define leadership at the Ames Institute?
Not sure I have a sentence or two that's a definition of it. It's again, it's really what I see in an individual. if someone else is looking at you to see what you're thinking and what you're doing, and they're waiting to see where you go to follow you there, then something's happening that's causing you to be a leader. And then, leaders are defined by followers. I mean, let's face it, if you turn around and nobody's standing there, doesn't matter what you're called, you're not a leader. So there's got to be people standing behind you, trusting you. And again, that's where that influence comes in. You either influence people to want to follow your direction or not. And I think you achieve that by exemplary behavior and highly effective communication. Those two things are key to the characteristics that a leader would have. And if you have some of that, and people are tending to want to get behind you and follow you places, then you're a leader.
Right. And so you're talking a lot about influence and making sure people are following you and kind of doing all that. Where does mentorship and coaching come into leadership? Are these three things sort of interconnected, or do you find that leadership, you can be a good leader without being a good mentor or a good coach?
Yeah, I think leaders are naturally mentor and coach. I don't know if they all do it intentionally with a theme and a process behind that, but they tend to have the responsibility to do it. And they have a good sense of what's brought them to where they are. So they can convey what the characteristics and attributes are of great leaders that they've seen and some of the stuff that they do. But it's again, leadership is, a lot of people want leadership and don't have the characteristics and attributes, won't pay the price to actually be influential, while others are accidentally put up there and they discover they can be influential, right? But I get concerned about the ones that really are driving to want to be a leader, because I'm not sure that they get it. And the role that a mentor and a coach plays in the life or the progression of a leader is they make you aware of things you can't see. All of us have some blinders on in one way or another. So they can cause you to check and pause and think about some things and cause you to see things that otherwise you may not see. It's easy to get involved in a role, in a responsibility. You have leadership responsibility and get lost in it a little bit. Or you can become significant very quickly and start to think you're all that in a bag of chips. And so a coach and a mentor can quickly tell you you're not, just calm down and relax, right? So I think that everyone, the billionaires that I know have 6 and 7 coaches going on in their lives at all times, including tennis and fitness and business and all kinds of stuff. And I think that's probably the right way for most of us to go.
That's amazing. And so you talk a little bit about people stepping into the roles of leadership, and that sometimes people are put into those roles of leadership and they shouldn't necessarily be in there. But one thing that I've always talked a bit about is that everyone can be a leader. You don't have to have the title. So how do we sort of support people? Let's take it from our audience is HR leaders, HR leaders and business leaders. How do we as HR leaders support or train or give people the resources to become leaders, become better leaders? What are the processes and ways to do that? Sometimes we can't afford coaches, sometimes we can afford coaches, but what can we do as HR people to kind of influence that leadership mentality in our organizations?
Yeah, it's interesting. I see oftentimes go into an organization and look into the HR group, and there's generalists in there who are just naturally dynamic. They're not at the top of the HR organization yet. They're not in leadership positions, but they're dynamic and they have tremendous influence on their people. But the thing that we can do as organizations or as groups of leaders inside the organization as HR people is we have to have process. If you look at any winning team or any winning organization, they all have a process that they've proven. The winning teams have processes that work year in and year out. So they are doing things on purpose and by design. I'm going to go out and work with my people and on purpose try to find people that are naturally inclined for leadership, people that want it. And then I'm going to intentionally instill in them the characteristics and attributes of what a leader should have. So the first one is they've got to have desire. I'm going to go out and look at people that have a desire to be up there. I don't need to force people that don't want to be out in front to be out in front. There's enough people that want to be a leader that I can look for them and help connect their desire to that growth. And then there's some other characteristics that you've got to start to add to that. You've got to increase their knowledge in the space. Knowledge is powerful, but knowledge without understanding is useless. So I tell people all the time, if you drive on freeways or highways of any kind, you know that you're driving on a road with people that have knowledge but no understanding, so you're always having grief on the road. But it's true a lot of times with people, they just don't have the fundamentals. So with knowledge, you've got to gain understanding of what the circumstances are and what people are like. And you got to pay a price to be a leader. You've got to have a lot of stuff going on. Leadership, if you have knowledge and understanding about what it is, that's wisdom. Now you can do something with that. If you'll add skills to that, now you have the opportunity to influence, to make an impact, to stand out, right? And really do good things and cause people to watch you. And then finally, it's about personal accountability. You have to hold yourself accountable to high standards, and then you have the ability to hold other people accountable to those high standards. When people become personally accountable, then they're self-propelled. They don't need much leadership after that, much management certainly. And so there's just some key things that we teach that have to be part of the characteristics and attributes that you have as a person in leadership.
Awesome. I like how you really broke that down of the desire, the wisdom, knowledge, skills. And these are the characteristics that we can influence as HR people. We can figure out who these people are. We can help them get to the right spot. We can give them the resources and the tools to develop those skills. Now, on the flip side of things, we've all been in those organizations where there's a leader who shouldn't be a leader.
That's every organization I've ever dealt with.
Yeah. I mean, we've all had that person. We've all probably reported to that person. So how do you have that hard conversation with somebody who is in that leadership position, who maybe shouldn't be in that leadership position? And when do you kind of make that decision of this person needs to be moved out of this role?
Well, hopefully you make that decision sooner than later. Some people are great at interviews. Some people are great at climbing through organizations. Some people are good at intimidation, right, and manipulation and using advantages. And we end up with people in leadership positions that clearly have no ability to have a positive impact on our people. And in fact, they cause a tremendous amount of grief and unhappiness and frustration. And so that creates disengagement with everybody that's around them. And literally one significant person can damage your company so bad that you wake up one day and you're out of business because you just don't have good people anymore. So I try to encourage, when I go in to consult, it's not very hard to find that person. They usually stand out very quickly. And then you have to have a real heart-to-heart conversation with the people that care about the company. Because what I've seen is a tendency to hang on to people. I don't know if that's been your experience, but we hang on to bad employee because we like them. We don't want to, cause them to be in hardship and so forth. And it lingers and it lingers. And while we're lingering with this person and battling with this leader that's obnoxious and toxic, I'm losing 6 and 7 really good people. First to presenteeism, right? The quiet quitting that people are talking about these days. That's we've had that forever, but
it's got a new slogan.
Yeah, new slogan. They show up to work, but they're not enthused anymore. They're not truly engaged. They can't afford to leave right now. The package is too good, but they're not going to give much because this leader has driven them nuts, and so they're going to stay away from it. And the heart to heart is with whoever controls the organization to say, is this what you want? People are reluctant to buy into getting 360 reviews, especially at the top with leadership. And you've got to do that. You've got to find out what's happening really. And you got to have the courage oftentimes to let one of your good friends go work for somebody else. It's just, you get to a time when you have to eliminate. I always thought it was funny that at General Electric, Welch was famous for letting go of the bottom 10% of the company on a regular basis. But what people don't talk about is he let them know that they were there a long time before they were let go. You're down in this position. If you want to get out of it, we'll give you all the resources and the help that we can. But at a certain time, if you're still here, we're going to make a change. And there's ways to go about this that, doesn't have to wreak havoc on the company and ruin relationships. But there are times when we just have to stop and say, this far, no further. We're going to have to part ways. Too much damage. If I'm influencing 2 other people from this negative leader, I can't afford that. So we've got to make the change.
Yeah, and as you get the higher up the organization, that influence has the greater and greater impact. because, maybe they're only influencing 2 directors who are then influencing 4 managers who are then influencing 20 employees and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you disengage a key manager or leader anywhere in the flow, everything beneath them is going to be damaged by that.
Yeah. And it's, I think I've often approached this conversation with, CEOs and co-founders of like, there's a real values misalignment here of like, this person might be a really great, effective executor, but the values that we personify as an organization or whatever, however you want to talk about it, can have that misalignment and can actually cause much more damage than the positives that they are doing just as an individual.
I think so. One of the things I run into a lot is we promote a doer into a leadership position, and they really are best at doing things, right? So if they're the best at hammering nails, they're always going to have an inclination to want to deal with everything that way. And we all know that to he that is good with a hammer, everything's a nail. So they'll pound everything, right? And it's not that they're bad people or have bad intentions, but they look at everything as a doer mentality, and they want to get down and mix up with everybody and do stuff. And that really creates some damage. And they're just in the wrong position, which is our fault as an organization. We have to be very careful to put doers into really important doing jobs and allow other leaders to emerge. The top producer on your team is rarely going to be the right person to promote into leadership. Usually you'll lose all their sales production and they'll kill off the rest of the sales team, right? Because there's an arrogance and a personality problem that makes them really good at selling. So they're not the best always at leadership. And that's the key, I think, with CEOs and management from boards is, are we willing to have enough courage to promote a middle guy that is an actual leader to do the management process and turn the stallions loose to go out and produce their numbers? But we're going to have to appreciate them and recognize them and compensate them for being special. Got to make their position important, but I don't have to damage other people by that, right?
Yeah, I think you bring up that such a critical thing of like, and I've seen this over and over again of like, you're exactly right. We promote the best producer on the team. Often they don't want that promotion, but because we've created career pathways where the next step is management. You can't keep growing unless you become a manager and become a leader. Right. And it's a trap that so many companies get into.
Yeah, if you look at sports, they don't go, you have a great quarterback, they don't go make the quarterback the coach, they just pay more money. So, it's you take care of the position, you make the position significant, but don't Peter Principle, your people into positions that they're just not naturally good at. Find the ones that are naturally good at different things and place them there. It's Colin's old idea of put the right people in the right seats on the bus. It's as simple as it is. It is important that we do that, but you can't leave them in a inferior position. So they've got to be elevated and got to be made to be important. Maybe we make leadership and management more important than it needs to be.
Yeah. You don't want to feed too much into somebody's ego who's who shouldn't have that ego fed.
Yeah.
So I think we've done, we kind of defined what leadership is. We've kind of talked about the characteristics and, the pitfalls of promoting people who shouldn't be leaders and all that. But, now that we've kind of identified who those great leaders are or leadership in everyday people, how do we build that process? You talked a bit about that process. How do we build that process and how do we make sure that people can be leaders every day?
Yeah, it's a decision that they have to make. Napoleon Hill did research for 20 years in the 1920s and studied the highest achievers in the world and wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. And in there, he found the characteristics and attributes that were common to greatness. And the very first one that everyone had in common was desire. And he says the starting point of all achievement is desire. And there's a small group of people that want to be in that position. And there's a massive amount of people that really don't. And if we would stop promoting them, you're going to find that life gets easier, right? Promote from the leadership group those that are aspiring. Got to be careful about the ego, folks, because if it's just about ego, title, and who I am, that's not what makes up a leader. If you can find people and you find out that their entire team is following them, even if they're not the leader of that team, but that's who everybody looks to, that would be a good candidate for leadership if you interview and find out that they're open to that idea. And again, just our selection, our choices we make aren't very, very good. You mentioned it. We just promote people based on the tallest pygmy kind of concept. And it almost never works out. And yet in every organization, with no exceptions, we've got those people up here, and they are toxic, and they're difficult to work with. They're difficult to have meetings with, et cetera, et cetera. And it just creates so many problems. So you've got to, as an organization, you've got to have a vetting process, right? How do we review and how often? Sometimes we let things go too long because we all get caught up, right? But we've got to constantly be taking the temperature of the team to see how the leader's doing. And if we're not doing that, we're putting ourselves in danger of having 1 to 6 to 12 people start to quit, still sitting at their desk. Later, they'll quit and leave. But there's more damage done by sitting there, right, and having emotionally left the company. And obviously, everybody's dealing with that now. But if we just don't pay attention to how we're reviewing, we can find out. We just wake up one day and we've got lots of problems. We don't know how we got there. But I think that the first element you want to have in the process is, I'm going to find people that have a desire to grow with this company, want to be part of the leadership process, have a concept of what we're doing. They can articulate to me what the purpose of this company is and what is the contribution we're making to the well-being of other people. And I get a sense that they're bought into this, that this matters to them. And if I can turn them into people who have taken ownership psychologically of this company, then I've got people I can work with in leadership. And I'm not going to force other people just because they have a cool personality or they're a buddy or they've been here for 30 years, right? I'm going to actually go out and try to cultivate and choose leaders. Then I've got to have a process to turn them into one. I can't just, typically we call them into the office for 10 minutes and, hey, you're a leader. Congratulations, go forth and prosper. And, it just doesn't work, They don't know what to do. It's like giving people a new exercise program. They would do it. They just don't have a clue what to do first. So we've got to train leaders. Ben Franklin talked about this all the time, that if we don't teach them everything about the craft, about the art of what we're calling on them to do, it's our mistake. It's our problem. We've got to make sure they can do everything that we're asking before we turn them loose to do it.
I think, again, like you really hit on that point of like every organization does this, where they promote someone into a management role or an executive role, and they don't give them time or resources or training on how to actually do the job. And we've taken a producer and we put them in a management role. And what are they going to do? They're going to go back to what they know, which is producing. And they become micromanagers, and they become annoying, and they become toxic. I think that's, and do you question, just like you've worked with lots of different organizations, lots of different industries. Do you see this happen in more industries than in others? Is this prevalent across all industries? Is this just something that is happening all over the place?
Just human beings, I haven't seen a dime's worth of difference. If I'm in a meeting in Mumbai with a group of people, or in Melbourne, I don't see any difference. The fundamental human needs are the same, and our reactions to things are fundamentally the same, with just tiny cultural differences, but not enough to matter. So I see this issue everywhere. And people are confused about how to grow inside of the organization and how to communicate. Some are afraid to tell you that they want to be a leader. Others are afraid to tell you that they don't. They think they have to say yes when they really don't want to. And it's amazing how many people out there don't want leadership responsibility. And it's not because they're scared or that they're not good people. That's just not their thing. They would rather work in their little patch of the world and make a difference from here and be the best in the world at what they do. And why wouldn't I want them to do that? If I've got a team of 10 people, I want 8 of those. Mm-hmm. Just will tend to those things. The other 2 will figure out some other stuff to elevate them and move them along. But boy, I like to have a lot of doers in my company. I don't need a bunch of people fighting for the top rung. I want people that'll do things. And so I've got a responsibility to find out who my people are. And I think that's missed. When all of us that speak and consult talk about this, but very few companies are good at it. What do my people really want? And can I have a conversation with them over time that creates a position where they can thrive and we can thrive? And it's a decision that we've all made together, because then I get the best of their desire, the best of their intentions, and the best of their work without creating problems. So as a leader, if I could go around and just eliminate the problems that's in everybody's way, I think that'd be a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, I think, and I've had this conversation with lots of managers who are promoted into that leadership, and it's their first time of like really trying to set that expectation of like, your job is no longer to do the thing that your team is doing. Your job is now to make their lives easier so that they can do the thing that they want to do. And I think that conversation is often missed in this, in when we're promoting people, of just like that expectation as a manager. You've got to do the performance reviews. You got to have the one-on-ones. You got to have the conversations with people. Your job is to organize and kind of let them loose. It's no longer to fix that problem anymore. That's their job, to fix the problem. Your job is to help them fix the problem.
Yeah. And that's the biggest difficulty, because everyone's taught them how to do the work, but no one's taught them how to oversee work from other people. And so in almost every, if not every organization I go to, there's just a lack of training and teaching and growing people into be leaders. I'm not sure how many people even know how to do it, because you've got to change entirely their mindset from being a doer of the word, right? And they don't understand that working with your mind becomes the new way to work. So what I spend a lot of time doing is working with executive teams, trying to make them executives, because they're just workers that got promoted up into this room now. Now they're important. They're sitting there, just got their hat on, and they want to have a tool belt on, but they can't, because that's not their job anymore. Well, we don't give them a new one. We don't give them a new tool belt that has to do with leadership principles and how to oversee people. And we don't make them comfortable with the idea that you're not going to be busy for 8 hours. You're going to be intellectually busy, right? You're going to be observing things and just looking to see. And if things are going smoothly, sit down, relax, just let it go and support them. Go buy them a donut or something, but get out of the way. But we don't train anybody like that. You make somebody a manager, and the immediate thing he does is, well, I better start managing some things. And so I start looking over people's shoulders and micromanaging, because I think I have a job to do. And this is how my great grandpa did it, and this is how I saw my mom run her organization. We don't teach them what we want or what's right. So everybody's just guessing, everybody's just guessing. And how do I stay out of trouble? And how long can I keep this job, kind of an attitude?
Yeah. And I think like so many organizations, to your point, that they talk about like, it's all about like action and doing, and you better be producing something. And when it comes time to performance review, you've got to point to something that you created and that you did and that you built, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so to your point, is like, we don't really do a great job of rewarding and recognizing true leadership in an organization. And so, if we can't reward it and recognize it, why would anyone do it?
Oh, that's exactly right. And I spent a decade with OC Tanner, teaching companies and people how to recognize their people appropriately. It's interesting. I'm dealing with some people that do contract work at an Air Force base, and when they do performance reviews, the people on these teams, one person will go back and pull out 15 contracts that they've worked on, right, to close these contracts, and they're big contracts, and there's some good numbers, but they have 15 of them that they can talk about in this review for their last 6 months. This other person just has one, and so they don't know what to do. Their one project is bigger than all of the others put together, but they just have one, and they think, oh, I'm going to look stupid, I just have this one. It's monumental, but I don't know how to talk about it. And so they really get confused. And so I'll make up other stuff, because we measure the wrong things. We don't tell them what we're measuring. They don't know what the expectation is. So they just shine us on. They just try to impress us with a bunch. And those meetings are useless, because nobody's learning anything from them. It's just a bunch of BS that they make up to impress whoever's sitting in the audience, And again, there's just so many meetings like that. There's so much structure and so many reporting meetings, and not very many productive interactions with people. I wish we could just stop today, cancel all meetings, and just decide, okay, we're going to have 15-minute meetings a couple times a year, and let's just get on with it, because people typically know what to do, right? But we meeting people to death, because the people that call the meetings don't have anything else to do. So
yeah, they need to be informed and look busy and give their 2 cents on what's happening.
That's how they produce, is they call you into a meeting. So, it's like, I've used this all over the world, but it's like the salesperson who meets with the HR leader at Starbucks every week. They meet up every week. Now the HR person doesn't have power to give the contract to the salesperson not going to get anything done at all, not going to produce any results meeting with the HR leader, but it feels like work to both of them. Well, I met with X number of people this week. I can go back and write that on the whiteboard. I just come back from there's no potential for business there on either side, but it's work. And pretty soon everybody's involved in that kind of work. We wonder where the profits went.
Yeah, it's my KPI. I need to hit 7 meetings this week or 10 meetings this week. And I had my 10 meetings.
I just had one, but I landed the contract, right?
Yeah.
Nobody values that.
I like that. I like that thinking, and how we have to kind of reframe how we're measuring productivity and how we're measuring success and revenue and all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to bring up a question that we just got from the audience, but how do you handle, the player coach roles that some people kind of get put into, where they have to be a leader, but they also have to be a doer? So how do you handle that in a small organization where the leader might still need to contribute to production, where they have to still do, but they also still have to lead? How do you coach somebody in that position?
Yeah, that's a hard position because you're a player coach now. And so you've got to perform on the field, right? So you've got to be a master of your craft. You'd better be the best on the team, or at least super good at what you do. There could be a couple other people that perform at higher levels than you. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But you've got to have the ability to talk to them, but not use that authoritative dictatorial style. You just integrate yourself with the team, and at the key times, you're able to point the direction to where we go. But I don't have to harp on them. I don't ride them. I don't micromanage them. I don't make myself out to be more significant. I just behave better. I just do a better job. I'm constantly improving. And I'm also bringing to the team the stories of success that we have as an organization. What's the difference that we make? So I become a catalyst for energy by how I interact with them, but not from authority. I have to establish my authority through influence. The only power that a leader has is the power of influence, for good or bad. And that's what I've got to concentrate on, is influencing by my behavior and how I communicate. Exemplary behavior and highly effective communication, in that order, is the only thing you've got to work with, because they won't trust you until your behavior qualifies for that. When you qualify for their trust, they'll give it to you. And then you can achieve things. And then your communication will be important to them, but they won't care what you say till they trust you. And so those two things are the most important things I've got to do. I've got to earn trust. Humility is a big part of that, but I can be authoritative from humility as long as I know what I'm talking about and I deliver it in the right way. And those things are important.
I'm really glad, and thanks, Connor, for that question. And I think I just want to highlight kind of what Lisa mentioned as well, of just like one thing that they do in their organization is they call them the hats. So the worker hat, the manager hat, the leader hat, and the owner hat. And as we grow, we reduce our hat rack. I love that. I think that's a great metaphor and a great way to think about it. I often do the same thing when I'm talking to them. I'm going to put on my worker hat. I'm going to put on my HR hat, my business leader hat, and speak from those different perspectives.
The only people that think about that are people that have bigger hats. The team don't think about things that way. Like a person that's number 7 on a 10-man team doesn't think about putting on their leader hat. But there's days when I need them to, because they're better at something than everybody else is, or they have this personality, and they really can change what's happening on the team. But we don't give them the idea that it's okay for them to lead out and to be the shining star when it's time for them to do their thing that they're good at.
I love that. Yeah. And it's really, I think you want to highlight something you made in your last statement, which was like humility. Like, as a leader, you have to be humble. When the team wins, it's not your win, it's the team's win. And when the team loses or makes mistakes, as the leader, you're the one who steps in and takes that accountability. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's what it means to be a leader, is that you are the one who gives away the praise, and you're the one that takes on the accountability.
Yeah, I mean, humility is often misunderstood as meekness, and humility, truly humble people are the least meek people that I know. They're just humble, right? But when the time comes and something needs to get done, they get it done. But they just don't have to get it all over themselves, right? I mean, you just don't have to get yourself all over other people. If you're really doing a good job and you are, You don't need to talk about it. The people that need to talk about it are not the ones that are doing it. So just, Shakespeare's question, to be or not to be, that is the question. And it is either have the characteristics and attributes of great leadership or you don't. And if you don't, develop them, but you don't get them by talking about it. You don't get them by telling people how much money you make or what your position is and those kind of things. We all know authoritative people, and most of them don't say much.
Yeah, they're title chasers. They want the big fancy titles, and but they're not always willing to do the work for it. Well, they're rarely willing to do the work for it.
They wouldn't even know what work to do.
So I want to come back to we've all been in those organizations. You've talked about it a lot of there's those organizations where there's so many mistakes being made around leadership and what it actually means and how to reward it and recognize it and measure it and all these things. How do you go about, or how would you encourage people in my position or our audience who are kind of HR leaders? How would you coach them on convincing a skeptical CEO or CFO or those people on the importance of making these changes to create a real leadership culture and empower those people who should be the leaders and promote those those people who are not the best producers, but they are the catalyst for execution in their teams?
Yeah, that's tough because we can say things right now about we can teach correct principles how to do this, but then your people that are listening are going to say, yeah, but we have a leader that doesn't want anybody strong around them. Right? So I see this, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's dramatic. The leader gets to that position and they don't want to be threatened. Right. And I just read an article yesterday about how many CEOs fail in the first 3 years over the major businesses. And it's a huge percentage. Right. But they don't want anyone around them that could threaten them or look like they should be the next CEO. So they keep that person out of the mix. So they dumb down the next level. So the vice presidents now are not strong leadership people. They're people that are subservient to this one king CEO or queen, as it were. And so what will they do? They'll replicate that because they're the same kind of person. So the next level is dumbed down, and pretty soon we're pretty stupid, right, as an organization. And gosh, that's so prevalent because you can't get anything done with that type of mindset. There's just nothing you can do about people that won't do that. Conversely, if you've got a leader that has the ability to put strong people around them that shine, that just absolutely kill it, and they start to be superstars, even beyond what that CEO or leader looks like, that's the person I want coaching my teams. That's who I want in charge. And instead, we kind of end up replacing them, right? We don't value team building. We talk about it. We give it voice service, but we don't literally promote that. And I think that's the most crucial thing. If you look at the most successful organizations of any kind, the person that's in the middle of that shaking it up knows how to go get great people and produce. The language we use is create a great place where great people can do great work, and don't be afraid of them, right? Create a team of people that stand well above you, but you have the ability to keep them together, manage them, and get the work out of them. And just, it's about getting the ego out of the way. The more ego you have out in front, the less authority you have with other people. They see that. It's obvious. So you don't have respect. And yet the people that have a more humble approach to that with strength end up having all the respect of other people, and they can get a lot of things done. Right. But part of it is the mentality of what is a leadership position. They get the business card, they get the office, and they get a paycheck, and they think, damn, I'm somebody significant now. I've always wanted to be in leadership. Here I am, and that's it. And nobody sets out when they're made a leader. No, we ought to send them to camp or something, right? We shouldn't let them out in the world. We should bring them in, make them a vice president, and spend 6 months. I want you to go out in the company and find out what's going on. But they don't. They come in and they start changing stuff, and trying to pull their friends in, and they just get lost in the position. Right? I think we've just got to be more aware. Emotional intelligence is the key to all of this. Being self-aware and others aware, nothing more important to being a successful leader than that.
So I'm going to ask a question. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but say you are an HR leader or even just a manager in one of these organizations where, you've got the the emperor or empress at the top who keeps dumbing down all the levels because they don't want to look bad. They want to be the number one person. You don't prescribe to that. So what can you do? Obviously, you're not going to be able to like change the mentality at the top, but what can you do to kind of create some sort of microcosm within your bounds of influence to create a good leadership mentality or influence the people around you? What can you do in those types of situations?
Yeah. While I'm working on my resume, I'm gonna build build people around me, right? I'm gonna build my team that way, and then I'll go work somewhere else. But you don't win very often. If you've got one or more leaders above you that are like that, you don't win very often. Oftentimes they're family in the company or whatever, and they're literally not movable. There's just leaders in places that are not going to be moved. They're not going to change, and they're not going to change their mind. So you're stuck with controlling your kingdom and doing the best you can with your little spot of the world, or you've got to make the change and go someplace where you're valued. And oftentimes that is the solution to that. Take your skills somewhere else. But the only power I have is to influence what I have control over. So my little kingdom, I'm going to get the very best people I can, and they'll probably end up serving above me at some point, right? But that's it. I can control my part of the world. And I think one of the other keys is not worrying about the rest of it. Is I see people worry themselves sick about what everybody else is doing above them and how miserable they are because of that. Well, why would you empower people to affect you like that? Be separate from it. If you got to put some resumes out to have opportunities, or some optimism, do that. But changing other people and other systems is difficult, if not impossible. So there's some acceptance that goes with it. So I'll change my part of the world. And if somebody and I've seen this, I've seen where a leader has seen somebody build their part of the world better, and they've paused the machine and said, what are you doing over here? And they've expanded it out, but it's rare. It's incredibly rare for it to happen. But that's what I can do, is just do what I can influence and stay there.
Awesome. I love it. And I think that's such a key thing is like, stop worrying about what's happening around you because you can't impact that. And you're just going to go insane. It's going to create burnout and you're going to have to leave sooner rather than later. But what can you do for the people around you?
Another thing to remember is it's not true. All the things you're thinking about these people aren't true. You don't really know the backstory. You don't know what's really going on. And so the devils that we put in our head with all of our thinking isn't accurate, and it's always more negative than it needs to be. So you just got to let it go. Sometimes you have
to. That's so true. It's definitely the one of the lines that I tell people is like, they're like, well, what if we just don't say anything? I'm like, well, the story that people are going to make up is going to be way worse than what you don't want to say. So just say it.
Yeah, I think we bite our tongue way too long, right? Why continue to be miserable? Of course, there's that philosophy that to remain quiet and be thought a fool rather than speaking and removing all doubt. But we should be willing to speak up probably when it's time to. But that should be done in a private setting, and you take your risks by going in there. But I think you can go into some leaders and say, there's something on my mind. I'd like to talk to you about it, and do it in a respectful way. I think we can make progress, but we're going to have to learn the skills of communication and how to have crucial conversations. There's a book you can go read to learn that. But you can't do it from just, hey, I've just been Kevin all my life, and suddenly I'm going to have the ability to walk into an executive office and change their mind. That's not going to happen. I've got to do some research. I've got to prepare myself to put myself in a position, and I probably ought to have things going on in my part of the world in the company that's so good they have to respect me. Then I think I can have influence with some communication.
I love that. So, we've talked a lot about leadership and problems within organizations and how to influence and all of these things. And so, if I wanted to go do some research and go look at resources and books, you've mentioned a few, but what are your sort of like, there's so many books out there about leadership. Some of them are good, some of them not good. What are your top sort of 5 books, resources that you would recommend people to go kind of check out if they want to learn more about not only making themselves a better leader, but influencing leadership culture within their organizations?
Well, Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was named the business book of the last century for a reason. it's just habits that you can acquire, that you're in control of, that will cause you to be better. They have governed what I've done all my life, 40 plus years, taking me where I wanted to go, and enabled my life that I have now, because they work, because they're based on principles. So I go back to most of the books that are older. When Covey and Napoleon Hill and those guys were doing their research, they discovered that a lot of the new research is fluff. It's personality-based stuff. And we've got to go back to real research. You know, what makes successful, highly achieving people that way? And there's a few simple characteristics, but study the people that did the deep research. So Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, obviously. 7 Habits that's the Bible. That should be open in front of you on your desk your entire life. Studying it, because that's, you know, those things, they actually work. That wasn't a book where Stephen wrote that just to sell stuff. I mean, he was late in his 50s. He didn't become Stephen Covey until his 60s, and he did very well, obviously, but that wasn't to build a new company. And, you know, a lot of books are sold for that reason. And you have to think about that when you're going to read a new book, is why did this person write this book? What's the point, right? Is this just a way to establish them as a great speaker or make money and all of that? So I go back more to the original stuff. I suspect there's some new books that are out there. There's some Dyer is another guy I like. He takes a softer, kinder, gentler approach to personal development. Wayne Dyer, who passed not too long ago. Clayton Christensen's work is important. Christensen, you know, really talks about character. Anybody that talks about principles and character, that's what you want to study. You don't want to study fluff or themes or concepts, you know, or systems that have been created by somebody that they just have a great graphic for it. It's colorful. It looked great on the wall. Simplicity is what works. You know, Thoreau wrote from Walden Pond when he was teaching us all about simplicity. He said, simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. And then his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay back to him. He said, one simplicity would have sufficed. You know, literally bring it back to one, you know. And I don't know. There's so many books. There's value in reading them. There's no question about it. But be skeptical and be analytic and read slow and read to learn. Don't read to finish. Don't read 100 books a year. I talk to those people. They can't tell me what the 35th book was or what they learned in the 60th book. Just read a page and learn from it and apply it, right? And any book can be good. But again, I think I go back to the classics, you know, Win Friends, Influence People, things like that.
Awesome. I love it. I know we're kind of like, we've talked about all the questions we wanted to talk about and the things that we wanted to cover. If anyone has any questions, we've got a couple minutes left. Throw them in the chat. Anything you want to learn about leadership, influencing change, all those things. I know, Kevin, you can speak to any of that. So just drop it in the comments.
I have all the answers. So yeah, just ask the question.
Yes. Don't be afraid. Please ask the questions. And I know, I'm sure a few folks are already getting ready for their turkey dinner tomorrow and prepping for that. So,
Yep.
But I just want to say, like, Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, sharing your perspectives, your knowledge, and really talking about leadership, because I think it is such an important skill, and it encompasses so many other skills that you have to kind of work on and develop before you can be a great leader. And so many people say they're great leaders, but actually aren't, because, you know, they're not doing the work, and they're talking more about how great they are than they're actually just being the leader themselves. Yeah. So I think, you know, if you had one last kind of nugget of advice or truth or whatever, what would you want our audience to, you know, kind of leave this webinar with? What's the one thing you'd want them to leave with?
I want you to analyze whether what you're doing right now is what you really want to be doing. A lot of times we get a job, or we start off on a path, and we were younger and we made decisions based on things that aren't true anymore. And what I do when I first consult with people is I challenge them with that. Did you start this company to be in the situation you're in right now? And is it still the thing that's going to take you where you want? So you've got to begin with the end in mind, right? The only way that your phone is useful when you're traveling is if you can enter where you're starting from and where you're going. And if you can't begin with the end in mind and enter the destination, the phone's no good to you. So you got to do that. But I've got to ask myself the question, what did I want to be? Not where did I want to be? What did I want to be when I started this? And is it still fulfilling me? And if it's not, I challenge you to find out something else it is. Life's too short. When you get old like me, you look back and you just think, man, that went too fast. Too many decisions I could have made in different ways. And so I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself. Am I going in the direction that I really want to go now with who I am now, and not just hanging on to a decision I made 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago? Do some evaluation and study emotional intelligence for the rest of your life.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for joining us. I know it's a short week, so I appreciate you showing up and asking the questions and engaging. I know if you want to learn more about the Ames Institute and want to talk to Kevin, I know he's offered to give anyone who's interested just like a 30-minute free coaching call. So maybe Connor or Tyler, you can drop that in the comments, his email, so you can get access and reach out to him, or reach out on LinkedIn, or check out the Ames Leadership Institute online. But, you know, I would recommend taking them up on it. I mean, I've learned so much in this conversation, my other conversations with Kevin. I'm sure it'll be a really well spent 30 minutes of your time.
Look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome Thanksgiving week. Appreciate you all. And we'll see you at our next webinar coming up in December. Thanks, y'all.